All right, Nick, let's talk about the Nebraska Cornhuskers. Big win. It was against a lesser opponent, but Nebraska needed to come out and show they're at the next level. They were able to dominate those lower level teams, and they absolutely did in a huge way. There's a lot of data, a lot of stuff to break down about this big win for the Cornhuskers. I think everyone's going to like what we have to bring to the table today. But first, I'm Andrew, that's Nick, and this is Saturday Morning Inspection. All right, Nick, as I alluded to, big win for Nebraska. They come against Akron, obviously a lesser opponent, but what did we need to see? We talked about year three, the turnaround. How is this thing going to get moving? We saw them come out week one, win the close one finally. They were able to seal the deal on a close game, something they hadn't really done too much in the first couple of years under Matt Rule. What do we see this week? Total, utter domination of a lesser opponent by the Nebraska Cornhuskers, and that's something we also haven't quite seen yet by this Cornhuskers team under Matt Rule. Starting to see this turnaround. Let's look at our first graph here just to kind of give people an idea of the difference of this win versus other wins in the past for the Cornhuskers. So brings up our first graph here. I have the highest scoring games under Matt Rule. We got starting on the left, Northern Iowa in 2024. They scored 34 points against Northern Illinois in 2023, 35 points. UTEP 2024, 40 points. And Wisconsin in 2024, 44 points. All respectable wins, especially Wisconsin. You think 44, that's good. Well, why don't you go ahead and add 24 more points onto that? And we have the domination against Akron here in 2025, 68 points by this Nebraska Cornhuskers team. That's the key here for me is this is a team that came out and dominated offensively and defensively with a shutout. They came out against a lesser opponent and just ran the table. This is Ohio State-esque beating up on the little guy type stuff we saw from Nebraska. Dylan Raiola, really great stuff from him as well. I just think overall, this is a really strong performance. And speaking of performances, let's actually just look at some of these top performers, and you can see guys like Dylan Raiola here, 24 of 31 for 364 yards, 4 touchdowns, 0 interceptions. Good stat line that shows confidence. It shows, hey, this is a guy that can go out and absolutely move the ball on the teams that you're supposed to beat. Dylan Raiola doing the job, showing himself as a top tier quarterback. Then running game as well. Emmett Johnson had some of those big splash plays to get the game going. Really great 140 yards, 2 touchdowns by him as well. And I think, as you can see, a couple of the other guys that get able to get in the game, TJ Lateef at quarterback, shows that the backups can come in and do good stuff against the lesser opponents as well. So I think this was the key for me. We're checking the boxes off on this Matt Rule rebuild. You're starting to see, okay, first week, can they go out in a tough game, not a home environment? Can you go out and get a win against a feisty opponent, a close win? Boom, they check that box. Game two at home, can you go out against a lower opponent and blow their doors off? Boom, they did that as well. This is looking really good for the Nebraska Cornhuskers for me. I think we're seeing a completely different team here for the Huskers in year three of Matt Rule's tenure. Curious what your thoughts are on all this, Nick. But before we get to you, Cornhusker fans, in the comment section below, I showed the last 3 years. We're talking, the Matt Rule era of Nebraska football. I showed the biggest wins that they've had through that time period. Is this big win against Akron, the big blowout, the most dominating offensive performance you can remember of Nebraska? Or is there another one that comes to mind maybe throughout their illustrious history? I'm sure there's a lot of bigger ones as well. So let us know the most dominating win that you can remember in Nebraska Cornhusker history in the comment section below. But nonetheless, Nick, what are your thoughts on this big time beatdown by the Cornhuskers?
So there's a rule, right, when it comes to defining what makes a good team, and it's more prevalent in the National Football League, but I think it still holds true in college football as well. Good teams beat the bad teams and beat them decisively. Now, in the NFL, that usually means a good team beats a bad team, by 17, 20 points, right? You have a Super Bowl champion contender plays a team that's really not good that season. They should win decisively. They should win 34-10, right? That's a sign of a good team. If you have to go to those close games against those bad teams, that's a problem. The same holds true, I think, in college football, but there's a little bit of delta to it, right? There's sort of a corollary is that good teams absolutely obliterate bad teams, right? And that's just the reality of college football. The talent disparity, the depth disparity really widens. And that's an indication of you are a good team in terms of you have a chance to be something and winning a conference, making the postseason. Do you absolutely obliterate, humiliate the bad teams just because your depth and your talent is so far superior? By humiliate, I don't mean intentionally embarrass. I just mean you've got so many good players that by the time you throw your second and third stringers in there, they're still so far superior to your opponent, right? That's the sign of a contending team in college football. And we see this, of course, you brought it up. The Ohio States of the world do this all the time. The Alabamas, right? Traditionally, like this is what happens when you've got a really good top contending team against a MAC team, a Conference USA team, or an FCS team. It just becomes a massive mismatch. And look, I played FCS football. I've been there where you've gone up against these big schools and you just get absolutely obliterated just because their third stringers really are better than everyone else on your team. And look, sometimes you get some good matchups as an FCS program where a team isn't really a contender and their starters and second stringers really aren't that much better than you are, right? That's usually a red flag. Nebraska has the opposite, right? Their third stringers, their backups, their depth so far superior to what their opposition showed. And that's a sign of a contending team. What's very interesting is you brought up Nebraska's most scored performances and their biggest wins. I had to go back. I think that 45-11 Northern Illinois victory, that 34-point victory, was the most decisive victory that Nebraska's had under the Matt Rule era. I know a lot of people look at the Wisconsin victory last season, that 45-point performance, but it was still, Wisconsin scored some points, and that was a decent performance from Wisconsin offensively, at least on paper, in terms of points scored. So it wasn't a close game, but at least there was some level of competition. But if you go to that Northern Illinois matchup, right, another MAC team, just like Akron, we're talking about a 34-11 victory. We're talking 23 points, right? Just to fact check myself live here, 35-11, excuse me, a 24-point victory. This was 68-0, right? There are levels to this. An average team beats a bad team 35-11, right? And that's what Nebraska was 2 years ago. They were very average. If you go back to last season, they played Northern Iowa. They won 34-3, right? They won 31 points, right? Again, that's an okay team beats a mediocre team by 30 points. What do the contending teams do? What do the top teams do? What do the top 10, top 15, top 20 teams do when they play these mid majors? They beat them 60-0. They beat them 70-3. They beat them 59-0, whatever it may be. And that's what Nebraska showed, I think, last night. And I think that's what makes them a real contender. I know it doesn't guarantee any other victories, and there's going to be much tougher opponents, and there's going to be a lot of lumps to take and a lot of challenges to overcome. I completely understand that. But this is one of those box to check, right? Just like week one, and you brought this up, and I think it was very astute. Winning a close game, especially away from the friendly confines, was a box to check. That's something Nebraska has struggled with over the past few years. I know it was Cincinnati, but still, finding a way to close out a game you should have won where you outplayed. That was a close game. Nebraska has struggled with that in the past. They got it done. That was a box to check. Week two against an inferior opponent, do you show yourself to be just an okay team? Do you beat them 30-3? Do you show them yourself to be kind of a mediocre team, beat them like 35-17? Or do you show yourself to be an elite contending team and beat them 50-0, 60-0, 68-0 in this case? The answer is they show themselves to be a top contending team, and that is a great sign for Nebraska going forward. We talk about checking the box early in the season. I know a lot of people really don't talk about this too much, but I think it's the important thing to focus on is about setting the habits and setting the standards and expectations and how you're going to execute and simultaneously building confidence, right? You got to get the processes in place. You got to figure out who your key players are going to be, your key schemes, your key play calls, key routines. Got to get all that squared away while also building confidence. And right now, Nebraska has really showed they know how to do both of those things. They got the big close win, building confidence. They made a statement victory against Akron, and that made them look like a top elite contending team. I mean, if you looked at the score where you said, oh, this is what I would expect Nebraska in 1995 to look like, right? They play Akron, they win 68-0, right? Again, that's confidence boosting. You're setting the standards in the process all the while you're doing this. As you get deeper in your schedule, as you get in conference play, it will really matter. This is a good sign for Nebraska. Obviously, it's not going to put them in the playoff. They got conference games to go, a lot of tough games. There's going to be a lot of close games and a lot of really hard opportunities down the stretch for Nebraska. But this was a good sign. This was another box to check. And across the board, this was domination. And that's the other point I want to bring up as well. It wasn't like, Raiola threw for 500 yards or something where it just so happened Nebraska's receivers were so good that Akron's corners couldn't cover them, right? It wasn't like one part of the game that was a total mismatch. It was every single level, line of scrimmage, skill position, passing, rushing, run defense, pass defense, across the board, special teams, across the board. Nebraska, there's first, second, and third strings far deeper, far more talented, far more well prepared than anything Akron could have. And again, it's Akron, right? We're not saying like, they're not a national championship contending team. They're a mediocre MAC team. If we're being honest, I don't want to crap on Akron here, but that's just a fact. But the fact is that Nebraska showcased why I think they have a chance to be a serious contending team. If you look at the top teams, Ohio State, similar kind of victory. Florida State, similar kind of victory. The Alabamas, the Georgias, right? They all have these dominating victories. The USCs, the Oregons, although to be fair to Oregon, they absolutely obliterated Oklahoma State. That's a much bigger deal in terms of competition. But the top contending teams, when they play inferior opponents, they beat them by this scale. Nebraska in prior seasons and decades gone by, when they've played inferior opponents, they beat them by this scale. And that is a great sign this season for Nebraska.
Yeah, and just a couple more points I want to end on here is Nebraska, big win offensively, big offensive performance. But I think, like you said, all three phases, different levels of the game were all dominant. A shutout by the defense. Actually, their first shutout in 14 years.
Yeah.
First shutout since 2009. So, everybody is looking good. The whole Big Red machine is up and rolling here. Everything is looped up, ready to go into conference play. We got a big time, schedule ahead of Nebraska. But like you said, everything is rolling here. Historic performances on both sides of the football. So you love to see that. We always say this on this channel is, you can only look at what you can look at as far as the season goes. We could say, oh, well, let's look future. They haven't played this person. They haven't played this person. Well, for who they have played, these are the things that they have done. And so after playing Akron, a lower tier opponent, this team shows they can be absolutely dominant if they need to be, if the opportunity arises. They're not going to squander against a team that they should beat. So kudos to Nebraska. Like you said, I really love that point. It wasn't just Dylan Raiola and superior receiving power, throwing all over the field. It was dominant in all phases of the game, whether it was rushing, receiving, quarterback play, special teams at times, and even the defensive performance. Really great stuff for Nebraska. If I'm a Cornhuskers fan, I'm excited because this team's looking like it has turned the corner. And go back to that video we filmed just a month or so ago about Matt Rule in year 3, what he does, how he turns teams around. We're starting to see the beginnings of just that.